Hello and good evening. I'm Tim Parker and I'll be facilitating tonight's meeting, which is one of a series of community meetings being held by Sonoma counties for three groundwater sustainability agencies. The first slide you see here is we're very happy to offer Spanish translation. And I am not Spanish speaking, so I'm not going to go over the slide, but for those of you who are, hopefully you can take a moment and read that and be able to link into an interpreter who is basically translating our talking into Spanish for you. So now if we could go back to the first slide. And as I said, this is being held by Sonoma County's three groundwater sustainability agencies focused on funding options for implementing recently adopted groundwater sustainability plans. And tonight's focus is on Sonoma Valley. And so you'll see on the left that all users will be muted. You can post questions in the Q&A as follows. Tap, ask a question, enter question into the Q&A box, and then tap the send buttons. Some of these questions we'll be able to answer verbally, and others will be answers in writing. And of course, all the Q&A will be posted within 1 week and will be shared with the GSA Board Advisory Committee. Now you see there in the slide the agenda. And so we have the agenda meeting and purpose, then we'll hopefully get a welcome and background from Supervisor Susan Gorn, who's the Sonoma Valley GSA chair, although we understand she has had something come up with her family, so hopefully she'll be able to join us. And then we'll go over groundwater basin conditions, projects, and budgets that have been developed basically in response to the Groundwater Sustainability Act by Mark Estrada. We'll go over the fee and rate study, update and next steps. And then Jerry Bradshaw will be presenting that, and then we'll have closing remarks. And now I'd like to turn it over to Mark Estrada, who's the principal hydrogeologist and the groundwater expert for the Sonoma Water Agency, who will be covering this part of our program.
Tim, actually, I think this is part of Chair Goran's slides. So I'll go ahead and cover these.
All right. I'd like to introduce Ann DeBay, who's the administrator for the Groundwater Sustainability Agencies for Sonoma Valley, who will cover for Chair Goran. Thanks.
Sure. Thank you. And as Tim noted, Chair Goran did have a family issue that came up at the last minute. She's really sorry that she can't join us tonight, and we're crossing our fingers that she'll be able to hop on. But in the meantime, I thought I would start. And first of all, we want to thank everybody for being here with us tonight. We're coming here to, these are Director Goran's, Chair Goran's remarks, so I'm going to be reading them. But we're coming here tonight to protect our groundwater basin as we face ongoing droughts and climate change. And as many of you know, groundwater is a critical water source for Sonoma Valley, and it's the only drinking water source for thousands of people in the valley. And we don't want our groundwater basin to look like this picture, which is taken in the Central Valley. This photo shows that because of overpumping of groundwater, the land surface, the actual surface of the land in the San Joaquin Valley subsided or sunk by more than 6 feet between 1988 and 2016. In the Central Valley, wells went dry, and today entire communities depend on water being trucked in because their community water wells no longer function. So these kinds of problems were what led the legislature to adopt and the governor to approve the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act in 2014. Next slide. So in Sonoma County, the state determined that 3 groundwater basins must comply with SGMA, as the act is called. That's Santa Rosa Plain, Petaluma Valley, and of course, Sonoma Valley. And in essence, SGMA requires that we locally manage the groundwater basin, which is shown in this map. The area that's managed by the Groundwater Sustainability Agency is that area outlined in the blue dots and is shown in the lighter gray. So you can go to the Groundwater Sustainability Agency website to determine if you are in the basin. There's a tool you can enter and you put your address in. So local management means identifying, monitoring, and fixing existing groundwater problems that are caused by pumping of groundwater, and also preventing future problems. An example of what this means can be found in the drought emergency executive order that was issued by Governor Newsom yesterday on Monday. Order number 9 of that emergency order requires the Groundwater Sustainability Agency to provide written approval for nearly all larger well permit applications, effective immediately. So in other words, the county, which issues the well permits in Sonoma County, must get the okay from the GSA before a well permit can be issued for any wells except for public water supply wells and for residential wells that don't pump over 2 acre-feet annually. So as required by next slide. As required by SGMA, the Sonoma Valley Groundwater Sustainability Agency was created in 2017. The county, the city of Sonoma, and special districts have supported the GSA for the first 5 years through contributions. In total, local agencies have paid more than $1.7 million to support the GSA. This has been matched by state grants and technical assistance from the state of about $2.2 million. The funding has paid for the Groundwater Sustainability Plan and allowed us to operate the new groundwater agency and to hold more than 50 board and advisory committee meetings and several workshops and community meetings, all which have been open to the public. Next slide. So tonight, we're going to discuss the options being considered to pay for running the agency and implementing the Groundwater Sustainability Plan that was approved in December of 2021. We know that's why most of you are here, and we don't want to keep you in suspense, which is why we're showing you this slide. Unfortunately, the slide is a little complicated. The fee study that is underway is looking at a range of options, and the board, the GSA board, has not yet eliminated any of those options. So as you can see, the range of the fee or potentially a tax is very wide at this point. The actual level of the fee or tax will be dependent on several factors, including the type of fee that's selected and the assumptions that the board makes about the funding that the GSA will receive from other sources. So the board will be weighing these factors along with other considerations, including for taxes, the cost of placing a tax on the ballot, the likelihood of voter approval, and how the tax or fee would burden different types of payers. So our fee consultant, Jerry Bradshaw, will go into all the details, but we wanted to let you know the numbers right off the bat. We know that these numbers are a little scary, and we want to assure you that the GSA board includes rural landowners who share your concerns. We're looking at places where the budget can be tightened and at consolidation of administrative functions with Petaluma Valley and Santa Rosa Plain in order to reduce costs. So I know that the board will look forward to your questions and comments, and they will be discussing your feedback at the next meeting at the end of April. And now I'll turn it back to our facilitator, Tim Parker, to introduce our next speaker.
Okay, thank you, Ann. And now I'd like to introduce Marcus Trotta, who's the principal geologist and the groundwater expert for Sonoma Water. And he's been working with the GSAs since they were created and is the primary author of the Groundwater Sustainability Plan. So it's all yours, Marcus.
Thank you. Thank you for both introductions, Tim. And thank you all for joining us here this evening to go over this important topic. So as Tim mentioned, I'm going to go over our existing plan that has been developed and submitted to the state of California at a very high level. And I'd say that the information that I'm providing tonight is provided in great detail in the actual Groundwater Sustainability Plan. which can be found on the agency's website that's shown at the bottom of each of these slides. And the plan was developed over several years and included feedback from the GSA board, the public, as well as a stakeholder-based advisory committee, which included representatives of rural well owners, environmental organizations, agricultural and business interests. And so the plan has a number of different sections in it. And these next few slides, I'm going to go over some of the key elements of the plan. Section 3 of the plan that's on the website describes the status of 6 key sustainability indicators that the state requires us to look at for the basin. And section 4 of the plan describes how sustainability is defined and sets thresholds and objectives for each of those sustainability indicators, which generally set the goal of being protective of beneficial users within the basin, such as domestic well users and sensitive ecosystems that we have in the basin. And so I just wanted to give you that context and let you know where you can find some of that information if you're interested in diving into the details of the plan. And I'll also add that the plan includes an executive summary that goes into all the elements of the plan, but at a much higher level if you're looking for a quicker synopsis of the plan. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned, I'll go through each of these 6 sustainability indicators that are described in the plan, starting with water quality. And for this particular indicator, it's measured in the plan by looking at 3 different constituents of concern that have been identified in the basin that are either naturally occurring or the result of human activity. This includes arsenic, nitrates, and salts. Groundwater quality is highly variable throughout the Sonoma Valley subbasin, but is generally acceptable for most uses. And so while there are some areas that do have these localized groundwater quality programs that are related to historic land uses or geologic conditions. But one thing that the state does recognize is that because water quality is regulated by many other state and local agencies and requirements, SGMA, Sustainable Groundwater Management Act, really only requires that groundwater sustainability agencies not cause additional water quality problems through its projects and activities. Similarly, for another sustainability indicator, that's land surface subsidence. So if you think back to that picture that Ann showed of the land sinking in the Central Valley, that's what can occur when groundwater pumping is unsustainable. The plan evaluates whether land subsidence is occurring, what the cause could be, and whether it's permanent or an inelastic form of subsidence. Measurements that are taken within the basin using both GPS technology as well as satellite imagery have not identified any evidence of inelastic land subsidence in the basin that is attributable to groundwater pumping. However, it is also important to note that for all of these sustainability indicators, the GSA is required to set measurable objectives and thresholds and monitor for those and report to the state every year on their status. So these are things that have been looked at in the plan and are also going to be needing to be continually monitored and tracked as we implement the plan. Next slide. So for these next 2 sustainability indicators, that is surface water depletion, which is the one that's on the top here, that's caused by groundwater pumping, and the potential for seawater intrusion from groundwater pumping. Like many groundwater sustainability agencies in the state, in Sonoma Valley, we have very limited data on the connection between groundwater and surface water and how this connection supports endangered or threatened species that rely on water, like coho salmon and steelhead. So we need additional information about the connection between groundwater pumping under the jurisdiction of the GSA and creek levels in order to determine whether projects, programs, or possible restrictions may be needed to reduce the possibility of detrimental impacts to surface water and groundwater users. And so our plan includes a robust plan for developing better information on the connection between groundwater and surface water and the degree to which groundwater pumping may influence that connection. Likewise, we also have limited information regarding how and if seawater is migrating inland into the basin from the Baylands area as a result of groundwater pumping. And so to better assess whether seawater intrusion is occurring and to help protect wells in the southern part of the basin, the plan includes additional data collection, starting with some voluntary water quality sampling near that Baylands area, as well as plans for construction of new monitoring wells in the southern portions of the basin. And so filling these data gaps for both of these sustainability indicators are important areas of focus for the GSA over the next 5 years. And it's also an important reminder that the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act is meant to be adaptive and allows the GSA time to modify and refine its groundwater sustainability plan as new information is collected and becomes available. Next slide, please. So these last two sustainability indicators I'll cover are the chronic lowering of groundwater levels and reduction of the amount of groundwater that's in storage within the basin. In the plan, we characterize the basin as having two different aquifers: a shallow aquifer that's about extends from the ground surface to about 200 feet deep, and then a deeper aquifer that occurs beneath that. In general, groundwater levels are primarily pretty stable over time within the shallow aquifer system in most areas of the subbasin. However, in the deep aquifer system, groundwater levels have shown long-term declines over a couple of decades at least in a couple main areas, one being in the El Verano area and the other being southeast of the city of Sonoma. So these are areas that have been identified as potential problem areas and areas needing additional data collection and potential projects for to achieve sustainability. For calculating the amount of groundwater in storage within the basin, the plan includes use of a computer model that looks at the amount of groundwater coming into the basin from rainfall, recharge from the mountain front, and a variety of other sources. It also looks at the amount of groundwater leaving the basin from stream flow, groundwater pumping, and other sources. On average, in recent years, the amount of groundwater that's stored in the basin has been declining an average of an estimated 300 to 900 acre feet per year. So to calculate what could happen in the future, the SGMA also requires that these plans look out 50 years into the future and take into account potential changes to the climate as well as land use changes. So the plan includes simulations using that computer to predict what may happen 50 years out under those assumptions of changing climate and changing land use. And those predictions from the model indicate that the basin will likely continue to lose the amount of groundwater in storage, and groundwater levels in the deep aquifer will continue to decline without projects to replenish groundwater or actions to reduce pumping. Deeper wells could be impacted by those declines. Next slide, please. So to correct and prevent these problems and to build in a buffer for a lot of the uncertainties that are inherent in any type of technical analysis like this, including climate change, the GSP includes projects and actions and planning for projects and actions to achieve sustainability. These include starting out with voluntary reduction of groundwater pumping by providing well owners tools that have been available to urban water users over the years, where there has been funding for conservation programs, such as those in the city of Sonoma, and for ratepayers of the Valley of the Moon Water District, which have resulted in about a 37% drop region-wide per capita in consumption since 2009 through water conservation and water use efficiency incentives. And so this plan includes provisions for rolling those out to other users in the unincorporated areas who haven't had those made available to them in the past, with the goal of increasing indoor and outdoor water use efficiency for residences, businesses, as well as agriculture. The plan also looks at how the GSA can work with local partners, such as the Sonoma Valley County Sanitation District, to expand the use of recycled water in the basin to offset the amount of groundwater or other potable water that's needed. This is an important source of water that can help us achieve sustainability within the basin. Next slide. So some other projects include aquifer storage and recovery, and the concept here is utilizing wintertime water from the Russian River water system, which is brought in by aqueduct from Sonoma Water's facilities on the Russian River and delivered to the city of Sonoma and Valley of the Moon Water District. So in the wintertime, we have a lot of water available from the Russian River. And so the idea is to utilize that, pump it, inject it through wells within the Sonoma Valley Basin when it's available, and store that water underground, much like you would in a typical surface water reservoir for use in the summer or during periods of drought. A feasibility study, a regional feasibility study, has been done several years ago that found that we do have adequate wintertime water available for diversion nearly every year. Even during dry years, there's generally enough natural flows in the Russian River system to provide water that could be recharged into our local groundwater basins. And a successful pilot project was actually done in partnership with the city of Sonoma and Sonoma Water back in 2018 that found that the technology works in the basin and can be used to leverage other projects. And one of the other water purveyors, the Valley of the Moon Water District, actually just received a state grant through drought relief funding to help implement an ASR project within the basin. Another similar type of idea is capturing local stormwater. So this would be stormwater from Sonoma Creek itself and its tributaries, holding it in detention basins where this would be wintertime water as well, or flood water. Holding in detention basins where it can recharge the aquifer. Similar detention areas throughout the county can serve as ball fields, parks, schools, playing fields, areas for grazing and hiking during times of the year when the water is not being stored in those detention basins. Farmers can also help with aquifer recharge by capturing and holding stormwater in fields and vineyards, and this is an initiative that's gaining a lot of interest statewide called on-farm recharge that is something that will be explored as part of the GSP's implementation. And then lastly, the GSP also includes an activity to evaluate policy options that the GSA could consider adopting with the authorities that are provided to the agency by the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act. Or they could recommend policy options for other agencies, such as land use agencies, to consider. These policy options could include consideration of metering requirements for certain groundwater users. That wouldn't be something that the GSA could apply to rural residential users, but it could apply those requirements to commercial, agricultural types of groundwater users. as well as look at potentially whether mandatory conservation measures are needed in the basin. And so, part of the work that the GSA will be doing over the coming years is identifying what types of projects will work best in this basin, and what's the right balance between those projects that increase supplies and those projects that reduce demands. Next slide, please. So in addition to the projects and management actions that I just went over, the Groundwater Sustainability Agency must comply with SGMA by monitoring all those sustainability indicators that I went over. And also, we're required to work on closing the data and information gaps that we have in order to better refine and improve our plan in the future. This includes those data gaps related to surface water depletion and seawater intrusion, are kind of some of those two primary data gaps. And then there's also annual reporting that's required. We're just wrapping up our first annual report that's due this Friday. And then there are 5-year updates that are required for the groundwater sustainability plans that give you an opportunity to revisit your sustainability indicators and document to the state how you're doing in achieving sustainability within your basin. And then community engagement and communication is a critical part of the success of the GSA going forward, and that's also required by SGMA to be included in these in the GSP implementation program. Next slide. So the annual budget to comply with SGMA and complete those tasks that I just described is estimated to be a little under 1.1 million. As Ann mentioned at the outset, we have been working at doing what we can to refine this budget and look for areas to cooperate with the other neighboring groundwater sustainability agencies within the county to jointly share the cost of studies, projects, outreach, and updates wherever at all possible. And the budget will fluctuate over the 5 years. This shows a kind of an average smooth budget. And Jerry Bradshaw, who's your next presenter, will describe a little more detail on the budget and some of the assumptions that go behind that. The purpose of this slide is really just to provide the order of magnitude of costs and show you kind of where those costs are going towards. Next slide. And so we know this seems like a lot of money, and you're probably asking, how is this program going to benefit me? And so, while the GSA will not be maintaining or installing wells for property owners, that is still the responsibility of the well owners. Its job is really to protect the underlying groundwater basin to make sure that there's water available for your well going forward in this basin, which we all share, and to help ensure that the groundwater remains healthy for future uses. Benefits include the protection of groundwater levels, groundwater storage and quality from problems that can occur when there's overpumping of the basin. And over time, as we learn more, the GSA will help protect the basin from seawater intrusion and help provide the information to protect streams from drying up due to overpumping. And lastly, one of the benefits of the plan is that it allows us to retain local control of the basin rather than ceding control over to the state, which is what would happen if the basin were to not implement the groundwater sustainability plan and comply with SGMA. So with that, I'm going to be happy to answer any questions on what I just covered. And I just want to give a reminder to you that your next presenter, Jerry Bradshaw, will be providing information on the fee study considerations, options, as well as current estimates on groundwater use within the basin by different sectors. And so just keep that in mind for any questions you may have right now. But with that, I'll turn it back over to you, Tim.
Thank you, Marcus, for a very excellent presentation, covered a lot of ground. And we'll now go to questions and answers, but right after we have a chance to hear from Chair Susan Gorn, who's been able to join us. So if you have any opening or middle, I guess, program remarks, they'd be well received now, Susan.
Thank you, Tim and Marcus and Ann. I'm so sorry I wasn't with you at the beginning. Family obligation of caretaking interfered with me joining you, so here I am a little late. And great information, really appreciate it. And I want to thank all of you for taking your time tonight to learn about the groundwater basin and some of the actions moving forward. And I also need to thank my incredible board who've been working on this project for the past 3+ years. And I'm so grateful for their leadership in and working with the community for sure. So I'm looking forward to hearing the questions and the rest of the presentation. Thank you so much.
You bet, Susan. So we do have a few questions here that are in the Q&A, and I just want to quickly remind everybody that there is a Q&A panel down at the bottom. You click and you enter a question and then hit the send button. So keep them coming. And the first question will be for Marcus Trotta. And the question is, will gray water systems and compositing toilets be considered for county and state approval regulation as part of the efficiency plans?
Yes, we haven't fully scoped out all of the different types of water conservation and water use efficiency, technologies and methods that would be included. But those are certainly on the table and will be looked at. And I know the county has some information on those types of programs. We plan to do the GSA plans to do a study of what types of conservation and water use efficiency would be most effective within the basin in terms of existing groundwater uses. How are people currently using groundwater, and what types of incentives would give the biggest bang for the buck and likely be the most implementable by groundwater users. So, but those two would definitely be ones that would be considered.
Okay, great.
And Marcus, can I add, I think the question might have included composting toilets. To date, the county has not permitted the installation and use of composting toilets. I know there are some out there used by community members for sure. The board will be discussing composting toilets within a discussion of another issue. So I believe it's coming forward maybe March, or I guess March is just about over, maybe April. And so I look forward to that discussion because many have been advocating for tiny homes and the use of composting toilets within the tiny homes. So stay tuned. We're in discussions.
Great.
Thank you for that clarification.
Okay, here's another question, obviously for you, Marcus. It's will springs be part of the monitoring program, those that are tanked or collected, or is there another program to monitor surface water collection?
We don't currently have springs within the monitoring program, but that is something that could be considered going forward. As part of the plan, the GSA was required to map groundwater, what are called groundwater dependent ecosystems within the basin. That can be surface water where groundwater is discharging to it, but it also includes springs. And so the plan includes an initial map of known springs within the basin, but part of that data gap that I mentioned regarding surface water depletion will include better identifying where groundwater is contributing to these groundwater dependent ecosystems, including springs. So as we get more information on springs and where they are, and those are things that could potentially be included in the future.
Thanks, Marcus. And here's another question for you. How many acre feet per year could voluntary conservation save?
Yeah, it'll really depend upon how how extensive it's rolled out and utilized by the community for the purposes of evaluating different projects and management actions within the Groundwater Sustainability Plan. The plan did look at some different levels of conservation to estimate that figure, and I believe for the purposes of the Groundwater Sustainability Plan, we assume that we could achieve a 20% reduction in rural domestic water use and a 10% reduction in consumptive use for agriculture. And that resulted in a total savings of about 650 acre feet per year. So, depending upon the degree to which groundwater users implement those conservation programs, they could provide a sizable benefit to the basin. However, when we look at when we modeled out 50 years, there was also a need for additional projects, supply side projects to help with achieving sustainability, but certainly conservation can go a long way towards meeting that goal.
Might I add that our communities have been maybe numbed by our demand and request for conservation. And I know we have great products and services available through the Sonoma Marin water saving partnerships that might be advertised by the city of Sonoma and the Valley of the Midland Water District. So this is by far our most serious drought year. We're asking everyone to really clamp down on water usage, especially through irrigation, and look at the kind of gardens that you can plant with drought vegetation. And I know the master gardeners are working on planting a demonstration garden at Los Villicros. So stay tuned. This is going to be a very important year to embrace water saving technology and permanent water conservation strategies.
Thanks, Susan. Here's another question for you, Marcus. So what do we know about the contributing factors to the El Verano and Sonoma groundwater depressions for the deep aquifer? Are they primarily the result of commercial and residential withdrawal, or are there other factors that have to be considered?
Yeah, I would say they're both a combination of different types of uses. Both of those areas have high concentrations of rural residential wells. There are commercial uses, particularly in the southeast of the city of Sonoma, the 8th Street East corridor. There's a lot of groundwater users and commercial groundwater uses in that area. In both areas, there's quite a bit of agricultural irrigation, as well as I'd also mention golf course irrigation in the El Verano area. So really a combination of different types of uses coming from that deep aquifer system. And I'll also take a crack at another question on here that's kind of related, which is what is the age of groundwater in the deep aquifer? And there have been some studies on some water samples from wells that are completed in the deep aquifer system. And the age of groundwater can be thousands of years old, up to I think 20,000 years old in some cases for some portions of the deep aquifer system. It's usually a combination of different ages. So you have both younger and older water that's mixed together, but it does give you an indication of that the deep aquifer can take a long time to recharge directly. But it's also important to understand that the deep aquifer system, because of its porosity is a lot lower, it holds a lot less water, so it can respond a lot quicker as well, because it's under pressure to reductions in pumping or direct recharge to the aquifer. And so there are challenges, but there are also examples of other areas in the county where the deep aquifer system have exhibited similar magnitudes of declines. Talking about primarily the Roanoke Park area in Santa Rosa that had similar levels of declines where groundwater levels were hundreds of feet below ground surface. And after reducing pumping through the use of surface water and Russian River water rather than groundwater in that area, groundwater levels have recovered over the course of about a decade to pre-pumping conditions. So there are projects that can help with this, but it is important to understand that deep aquifer system is different from the shallow aquifer system. Next.
Great, thanks, Marcus. And the next question is, are the unincorporated county properties or ag and open space properties being considered for recharge opportunities?
Yes, that is something that has been looked at, and the GSA has been speaking also with county parks to see what types of projects and water saving opportunities may exist there, and so the plan itself, when analyzing potential surficial recharge using local surface water, primarily looked at agricultural lands that are near streams, because one of the big benefits of recharging from the surface could be that raising groundwater levels near streams can help with stream flow by enhancing base flows in the summer and fall, and help address that potential surface water depletion issue. But the GSA, as well as Sonoma Water, has also been in discussions with ag and open space for opportunities as well. But it is important to also note that one of the challenges related to surficial recharge in this basin is that because our geology is so complex and we have so much clay within the basin, that finding the right locations for recharge is definitely a challenge.
Great, thanks. And I'm going to paraphrase this next question a little bit. The state's requiring a lot of these local agencies. Is there funding to help support some of the projects to improve sustainability in the basins and meet the requirements?
Yeah, so that's something that we've already, the GSA has already received $2 million in grant funding from the state to develop the plan, as well as construct some monitoring wells within the basin, and do some other activities to close some of our data gaps. And there's additional funding opportunities coming up through the Sustainable Groundwater Management program from the state of California that we're looking at for helping to fund some of these implementation costs. And Jerry Bradshaw will get into this, but that's one of the things that the GSA board is considering, as to what level should they make assumptions for including grant funding into their future budgets. And so in addition to those direct funding applications from the Sustainable Groundwater Management Program at the state, there's also other opportunities for funding from the state through the drought relief funding. I mentioned the funding that the Valley of the Moon Water District recently got for their aquifer storage and recovery program. So there is funding sources that are out there that the GSA is focused on leveraging to the extent that we can.
And last question we have right now, which I'm going to paraphrase again, is there's concerns being expressed about the growth of vineyards in the basin and how that relates to supply. And there's a question regarding whether there'll be any limitations on the future and how that would work. And that might help to make a comment on the drought work that's going on.
Yeah, so one thing that's really important to point out is that while the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act does provide quite a few authorities to the groundwater sustainability agencies, it does not provide land use authorities to the groundwater sustainability agency. Those are retained by the counties and cities. However, SGMA does require that the GSAs coordinate with those land use agencies, share information, and vice versa. And so one of the grant funded projects that we've been working on is work that's being done by Permit Sonoma, which is the permitting agency and planning agency for the county, on better coordinating and sharing information regarding conditions within the groundwater basin.
Great, thanks, Marcus. And I think this last question we can probably handle in the time we have, and then we'll move on to Jerry's presentation. But what is the proposed residential monitoring program, and will it remain volunteer?
Well, I'm assuming that you may be referring to our existing groundwater level monitoring program, which has been in place for probably over 10 years now. One thing I didn't mention is that prior to the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act, in this groundwater basin, the Sonoma Water and other local agencies helped fund both a study by the U.S. Geological Survey and then a voluntary groundwater management plan that included a number of the stakeholders and interest groups that have continued to be involved through the Groundwater Sustainability Agency, and they laid a lot of the groundwork which was included in the Groundwater Sustainability Plan, including a voluntary groundwater level monitoring program, which has included up to, I think, about 100 private wells. And so that program is being transitioned to the GSA, and we're in the process of kind of refining that and looking for opportunities to expand that. So there'll be more information coming out on that over the coming year.
Great, thanks, Marcus. And now we'll hear from Jerry Bradshaw with SCI Consulting. And he's a consultant to the Sonoma Valley GSA who's developing a rate and fee study for the basin to determine how to fund the implementation of the Groundwater Sustainability Plan. So it's all yours, Jerry.
Thanks, Tim. I appreciate the opportunity to present here tonight in front of the community meeting. The fee and rate study, we're going to cover 4 primary areas. One is funding sources. Where do we go for funding? What are the characteristics of the different sources? We'll look at the groundwater pumping data, because a lot of the methods we're looking at would rely on distributing costs according to how much water different properties pump. So we're going to be looking at the groundwater pumping data. We'll take another look at the cost. You saw the budget a moment ago in Marcus's presentation. We'll take another look at that and do a little bit with that. And then we'll finish up with some primary funding options and the rates that go with them. So on the next slide, we'll take a quick look at funding sources. I've broken these into 3 different categories. The first one is grants. The Groundwater Sustainability Agency has already been around for about 5 years, and it's relied heavily on grant funding already. And I think that the intent is to try for as many grants as possible in the future. So that's something that's definitely on the table. Grants usually are at the state level, and the ultimate people who pay for those grants are all the taxpayers within the state. So obviously the costs do end up with the taxpayers, but it's fairly minor compared to all the other obligations the taxpayers have. The next category is the members of the agency, the county, the city, the water districts, and so forth. I've broken these into 2 subcategories: the water agencies, such as the city of Sonoma and the Valley of the Moon Water District. If they were to take on some of the costs of this, they could turn around and pass it along to their customers. So, because they have to obviously get made whole at some point. So the water customers would ultimately pay there. If you're looking at the county and a couple of the other agencies like a conservation district and so forth, they don't have ratepayers to go to. They would just have to swallow any costs that they took here and possibly even cut back on other services to make up for it. So that's how that funding source would ultimately get paid for. The last category is the beneficiaries of groundwater and all the other benefits you saw earlier in Marcus's presentation. And I've broken these into 2 groups. One are the groundwater users. These are people who actually pump groundwater to use or are directly dependent on groundwater from a neighboring well, for instance. The other category is all water consumers, because a lot of the customers of the city and the Valley of the Moon don't use much groundwater. A lot of their groundwater comes from the Sonoma Aqueduct, but it all factors into the same water supply portfolio. Groundwater is just one of the key elements of that portfolio, along with surface water from the Russian River. So all water consumers is something we have considered, but there's a lot of nuances with each of these as we go forward. On the next slide, as I mentioned, we will be looking at groundwater pumping rates, so we would know how to distribute costs, because that's one method we might use to distribute the costs around. So we'll take a look at what the metrics are. We've developed these 5 rate classes. The municipal and other public service providers, they pump groundwater to then pass along to their customers. So that's one group. We have agriculture and other irrigation, such as schools and golf courses. We have rural residential. They each only take a little bit of water, but there's a lot of them out there. So they do add up into a nice piece of the pie. And then on the smaller end, we have some commercial uses and urban wells. And let me talk a little bit about urban wells. The agriculture, rural, and commercial are properties that are outside of the municipal water service areas. So you're either in a public area, public water area, or you're not, and you rely on wells. Urban wells kind of straddles both. These are properties that are within a public water system, like in the city of Sonoma, but they're known to have wells. So we make some assumptions about how those wells are used, and we'll get into that a little bit later. So on the groundwater use, we actually, we have to quantify the groundwater use, and we do it in 2 different ways. The municipal and other public systems, that first bullet above, they report all of their groundwater pumping to the state, and we can have access to that. And we've pulled down the last 8 years of pumping data, so we know what they're doing. But all of the other uses, agricultural, rural residential, all of them, we don't have data. We don't have access to the amount of water pumped from those wells. So we have to estimate the pumping there. So that's a key element in what we're going to be talking about in a few minutes. There's some are actual pumping, but a large portion of this is just estimated pumping. On the next slide, we'll see a pie chart that shows how that's broken down. The 2 blue areas in the upper right area are the large public systems, and then all the small public systems lumped together. Those two together, the public systems, make up about 16% of all the groundwater used here. The two green areas, which is agriculture, which is a very big piece of the pie, and then turf irrigation, which is another small green sliver next to it. And then finally, we have rural residential, which accounts for 13%, and then commercial and urban irrigation add up another 4% together. So that's how the water is used in the Sonoma Valley subbasin. With another click, we'll show you these are the sections that the water is metered, and we have definite information on that. With another click, the rest of the pie is estimated. So you can see a large portion of the groundwater pumpage is going to have to be estimated. And we'll talk a little bit about how we do that on the next slide. So we typically look at the demand for a property. Since we don't know actually how much water you use, we look to how much water you should use based on how you use your land. So for the agricultural parcels, we have a pretty good data set on what crops are planted and how many acres they cover. And then the state has a lot of great guidelines on how much each crop, how much water they use. And we use the same thing for turf irrigation. So we look at the acreage, we apply factors to each one of those and come up with how much water that property would demand from the groundwater basin. The rural residential, we've based this on a series of studies and then confirmed it more recently with local data. But what we've done is we've come up with what an average rural residential property would use, and then we use that number for all rural residential. Commercial and urban wells, it's a little more complex and it varies by land use. And as I showed earlier, it's not a very big piece of the pie to begin with. Here's some examples of the calculations we did. The first one is 50 acres of vineyard. The rate for those is 0.6 feet per year. Now let me pause here and explain what that means. In the San Francisco Bay Area, we experience rainfall of about 14 to 20 inches per year of precipitation. 0.6 feet is about 7 inches. So this is another 7 inches of water that a vineyard would need to put on its crop to make it thrive and survive and be healthy. So that's the rate we use for vineyards. So if you take 50 acres times 0.6, you come up for this parcel, this example, 30 acre feet per year. So 50 acres of vineyard is 30 acre feet per year. If you go to pasture, the next example, 100 acres of pasture is a very low rate because pasture is mostly using water for possibly livestock and maybe some very light irrigation. That comes out to 4 acre feet per year for a large pasture. 100 acres of grain, that's considered to be dry farming. We assign it a value of 0 acre feet. So dry farming is not considered to be depleting the groundwater. And the rural residential, as I mentioned before, those studies all point to a 1/2 acre foot per year, which equates to about 446 gallons per day, which about 300 gallons might be for the household domestic use and the rest for some outside water uses. The last bullet there is important because we have very good data on who gets delivery of surface water or recycled water for all these parcels that are outside of the public water system areas. So we apply that. So if we have that 50 acre vineyard that I showed you earlier and it requires 30 acre feet, but if we learn that it gets 20 acre feet from surface water, then we'll only use the remainder, the 10 acre feet for the demand for that particular parcel. So the properties that are using surface and recycled water, the credit for that use is built into our statistics and our data that we have been developing. On the next slide, you'll see a table here with the actual numbers. We're still showing a range because we're still tinkering with the actual data sources. We're getting very close to nailing it down, but you see a range for the different systems. And I'll let this sit here for a minute as you scan that. At the bottom, you see that the total acre feet pumped per year ranges from about 6,000 to over 8,000 acre feet per year. We think the true number is somewhere in between. These estimates are actually a little higher than what the Groundwater Sustainability Plan estimated. They overlap a bit, but ours are coming in a little bit higher than that. And that's not a big surprise. We're taking a completely different approach to adding up the acre feet because we're doing it on a parcel by parcel basis, rather than the plan was looking at mass land uses and mass pumping. So the fact that we missed a little bit is not surprising. And the fact that this came in a little higher is also not surprising. The last down there, that asterisk refers to alternate sources. You can see Sonoma Valley Basin actually uses a lot of surface water and recycled water to offset the demand. So there's a pretty good amount there, well over 1,000 acre feet per year that's credited out of all those uses up there, mostly the agricultural and turf, obviously. On the next slide, we're going to show you the budget again. And Marcus talked a little bit about grants. We are hoping to be able to bring in some grant funding that would reduce the amount of revenue that we need to collect locally through groundwater users or taxpayers. So we have two options. In the white column, you see the 1.1 million, which is the number he showed you earlier. But if we take every line item and we estimate how much of that could be funded by grants, if we were fortunate enough to get them, and add all those up, that comes out to the right column, which is $447,000 per year on an average basis. That leaves about $675,000 that would still need to be funded locally. So with another click, we'll see, and then one more click, we'll look at the two numbers I want you to focus on, which is the $1.1 million total budget or the $675,000 partial budget. Those two numbers form the basis for two different rates I'm going to show you in a couple of slides as we get to the options. We'll have a low number and a high number. Those correlate to these two budget options. Now I want to stress here before we move on that grant funding is just estimated at this point. In fact, the grant application cycle is not even here yet. The grant applications won't be available until the fall, I think. And when the actual grant monies come, we still don't know quite yet, or whether we'll even get grants. They're often competitive, and whether this basin competes well, it remains to be seen. So there is some risk in relying on that as a revenue source. But we do estimate that. We've had good luck in the past, and we're hoping to get some revenues from that. If we go to the next slide, I've shown you how many acre feet are pumped, and we looked at how much money we need to raise through some fees. The calculation for the fee is actually a simple calculation. It's the total revenue required divided by how much acre feet if we go with a per acre foot rate. There's some other rate options that deviate from that, but this is the kind of the default that we're looking at, probably the most likely way to go. Also, this is the system that was used in the Santa Rosa Plain Basin. They actually adopted a fee back in 2019. So following that example, this is the calculation you get. And of course, the numbers are anywhere from $95 per acre foot up to $160 per acre foot. So let's go to some examples of different options. We've developed two families of options. Option A would be fees that would apply to the 3,000 or so parcels that depend directly on well water. And the first one is a regulatory fee, which is the one calculation I just showed you. And who pays this would be all groundwater pumpers, including the city, the water district, farmers, businesses, basically everyone that's directly dependent on groundwater. On the upside, this is a very proportionate way to distribute the cost, because the more you pump, the more you pay for helping to safeguard the groundwater aquifer. We also have a good example up the road in Santa Rosa area where the fee they adopted in 2019, and they are considering continuing that fee into the future. Also, we do credit for recycled and surface water deliveries. So those are pros for this method. Obviously, on the downside, these rates are pretty high. We understand that $160 per acre foot is a pretty high rate to charge. And as Ann mentioned in her opening remarks, we are still looking very seriously at some options to try and mitigate that and bring those rates down. And hopefully by the next community meeting in a month and a half, we will have some better news for you as we get a little further refined and meet with the board again between now and then. Let me give you some examples of what this dollar amount looks like. For that 50-acre vineyard we talked about, the rates would be $2,800 to $4,800 per year for their fee to help move this agency forward into the future. For that 100-acre pasture, which uses less water, it'd be $380 to $640 per year. And for the rural residential, it'd be between $48 and $80, somewhere in that range, depending on that. There is another option, which is to spread the cost evenly across all parcels rather than by pumping. We just give it a flat rate per parcel. It's a very simple way to go. It's easy to understand. Unfortunately, it's not very proportionate to how much water you pump. These would range between $220 and $370 per parcel, but that would be the same rate for a 50-acre vineyard as it would be for a rural residential. So it doesn't have quite the equity that the other fee above it does. Finally, I want to bring up the idea of state intervention. And I can't remember if Marcus mentioned this, but in SGMA, in the law, it does have a provision for if an agency doesn't get its plan done or doesn't pursue its plan to satisfaction and isn't able to mitigate some of the downsides of the groundwater situation, the state can't intervene and come and take over the agency for a short period of time. If they do, they bring their own fee structure with them. And that fee structure is $300 per well each year, plus $40 per acre foot pumped. So they're basically taking the two fees you saw above and combining them and imposing both of them, although the per acre foot is less. Now, even though that may look attractive from a dollar perspective, it's worth noting that the state intervention could also require metering on all the wells, which is a pretty big expense to get all these wells metered, including the rural residential wells. They also have another $100 per well fee on the de minimis users like residentials. I didn't put up here. Also, they can increase this fee if the situation with the GSA persists, but ultimately the GSA is going to be required to come back and get control of this and implement their plan at the end of the day anyway. So it's not an off ramp from the fee structure we're talking about. It's just a speed bump on the way to what ultimately has to happen with the Groundwater Sustainability Agency. So that's the options for just the well parcels. On the next slide, we look at option B, which is taxes or assessments that would go to all 12,500 or so parcels in the sub-basin. And the first one would be just a regular garden variety parcel tax, which most property owners unfortunately are familiar with. This would be assessed for all taxable parcels. It's the lowest rate of all the rates we've looked at because it spreads the costs around to many, many more parcels. However, it does require voter approval. It needs a 2/3 supermajority for a parcel tax to be passed, and that is very hard to achieve in this day and age. Another downside is it can't be implemented this year. Our goal is to have some sort of revenue structure in place to go into the next fiscal year, which begins July 1st. And there's no way to do a parcel tax between now and then. In addition to that, it would cost another upwards of maybe $150,000 to $200,000 to have that on the ballot. That's what the county elections office would charge. So there is another cost which is not yet in the budget. So there's some serious downsides in order to get the rate lowered to the $50 to $90 per parcel. The next option is a benefit assessment. This is a little bit problematic. We're still under legal review to make sure this would work. We think it would, but it also has some very strict requirements for proportionality. So that's why we would go back to a per acre foot charge for a benefit assessment. It also requires voter approval. Now, it's not registered voters like in the parcel tax. This is landowners voting. It only requires a 50% majority, but the votes are weighted. So the ag community would carry 63% of the voting weight here if they all came out to vote, as an example. So it's a quirky kind of vote, but it would apply. We think it would pass legal muster here. It also has a high cost. It's going to be $100,000 to $150,000 to implement, and also couldn't be done in this first year. So if either one of these were considered, which obviously would lower the rate down, but both require voter approval. You would also need to come up with a first year option for how to fund this GSA in the first year and years beyond, because if these aren't approved by voters, then you're kind of right back where you started. So these are some options. Let's look at what the rates examples would be for the benefit assessment. That 50-acre vineyard would be around $2,000 to $4,800 per year. The 100-acre pasture would be a little lower at $280 to $460, and the rural residential would be at $35 to $58 per year. Those are all annual charges you see there. So those are the options we're looking at and the different rate ranges we've come up with. This is what the math tells us. Like I said, one last time, I'm going to mention that we are trying to continue working with all the members agencies to see if there's a way to bring in some additional revenues that won't hit the pumpers or the taxpayers and to lower these rates. So stay tuned on that. The next slide shows the procedure we have to go through. These are the next steps. We're here at the end of March and heading into April. This is the time for the first round of community meetings. We'll also be meeting with the advisory committee, staff of all the different member agencies, and the liaison group. In April, we'll be back to the board to let them know what we heard from you all and to update them on any progress we've made on the data and the numbers and the policy options. And there'll be more community meetings. Actually, I think your next community meeting is in May. And then we would have another board meeting in late May. At that time, we're hoping to have the rates settled, figured out, and give the board the option to do a first approval on the rates, and then set a date for the public hearing, hopefully in June, to where they can conclude the procedural process in time to get all these put onto the property tax bills. That's probably how they would collect the money for these fees if they go forward, whether they're taxes, benefit assessment, or regulatory fees. They would probably mostly go in the tax bills, and there's an August deadline for getting those onto the November, December tax bills. So that's the procedural process we have up in front of us. On the next slide, just a reminder of some upcoming meetings. We have a board meeting coming up in about 4 weeks on April 25th, which is in the afternoon. And we think that's going to be an in-person meeting. So hopefully they'll be back to in-person finally. We have a second community meeting just like this set up for May 5th. And it'll be the same time of day as this one. And that one also will be an in-person meeting at the Sonoma Veterans Memorial. We have an advisory committee meeting soon after that, May 10th. And then those last two board meetings are May 23rd and June 27th, again, happening in the afternoon. And the venue of those is yet to be determined. So my final slide will be just a summary of what Marcus told you and what I told you to help refresh what you've heard tonight. And then we'll hand it back to Tim. So in summary, the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act, or SGMA, requires these agencies to form. It requires the agencies to define sustainability and ultimately to achieve sustainability through implementing the plan. Implementing sustainability in this case looks like various projects and actions that Marcus went through. We have to close the data gap so we can get smarter on how the water, surface water, groundwater, how it all works. We have to monitor how things are going and report back to the state so they can see if we're making any progress. Obviously, communication is a big one. Update the model that they're using. And then ultimately, every 5 years, we're going to have to update the plan and get that submitted. Just a reminder, the benefits of a sustainable groundwater basin is, and through this agency, is that we retain local control of the groundwater basin. I don't think anyone's eager for Big Brother to come in the form of state intervention. Well, obviously, the primary objective is to protect groundwater levels so wells won't go dry. And we saw in the comments earlier that some wells are already starting to go dry in a couple areas. Want to prevent future harm to animals and plants that are dependent on groundwater and the associated surface water that relies on the groundwater, such as through springs. And finally, protect water quality and combat seawater intrusion and land subsidence that could happen due to groundwater pumping. The rates we just went through, the regulatory fee would be 95 to 100, and that's per acre foot per year. A wellhead fee of 220 to 370 per parcel per year. A parcel tax, $50 to $90 per parcel per year, and the benefit assessment, which would be $70 to $115 per acre foot. So even though we would expand from 3,000 up to 12,000 parcels, you can see the rates don't go down that much because agriculture is such a big part of the groundwater use here that adding the city residential parcels and so forth doesn't dilute that as much as we had hoped. With that, I'm going to hand it back to Tim. We can go to the next slide and go to questions and answers.
Thank you very much, Jerry. Excellent presentation. And we do have some questions. Here's one for, I think, you, Jerry. How long would the fee be assessed? And just a reminder, keep those questions coming.
Thanks for that. The fee would probably go on in some form as long as the Groundwater Sustainability Agency needs to function, which I don't think we have an end in sight on that. The fee that we're looking at right now, it would be for a 5-year duration. And at the end of that 5 years, the agency would take another look at what its next 5-year budget looks like, if they're doing more projects and actions, or maybe they can dial it back. So costs could go up or down at that point, and the fees would have to be adjusted accordingly. If they're voter approved fees, that does bring in another element of, in case costs go up, you'd have to go back to voters. But that's what we have right now on the horizon, is at least 5 years, and then probably beyond in some form or other.
And thank you, Jerry. And here's another question on fees. If fees are based on acre feet, is that based on an estimated usage, or does it ultimately require some sort of metering?
At this point, and thanks for that question, I was remiss in stressing this. The estimated groundwater pumping, which is for 85% of all the pumping, is estimated. Since we don't have actual pumping data, and we aren't likely to get it, at this point, no one's suggesting we meter all the wells, because that's a huge endeavor. And it would take a long time and be very expensive. So we basically built a model, and we would be basing the fee. And this model, let me back up. This model is intended to be a tool for how to spread the costs in as equitable a way as possible. So we have to estimate this. It's not your actual pumping, we realize that, but we think it's an equitable model, and hopefully it's about as fair of a tool as we have right now. There will likely be a process in place if you feel like you're in the wrong category or your estimate is way off. There will likely be a method for you to come in and get your data updated and maybe get your fee a little more right-sized for your actual usage. So we hopefully will include that in any kind of policy action we take later on.
Okay, and I'm not sure who this is for, but I think it's worth posing anyway. And it may be for Marcus, but it's an accounting question, and it has to do with credits for recharge. And will there be credits for groundwater recharge in the basin? Would that be something that, if it isn't considered now, could be considered in the future? Maybe is a way to paraphrase that.
Yeah, that is a question that gets raised a lot, and it is something that could be considered in the future. There are examples of those types of initiatives in other areas of the state where they're being piloted. One thing that's important to remember is that we're not the only ones that are going through SGMA right now. This is being figured out all across the state. So there's other basins that have gone a little further in terms of assessing recharge projects, in particular down in the Central Coast and the Pajaro Valley. There's what's called a recharge net metering program, and the GSA staff have been in discussions with some of the researchers and water resource managers that are involved in that. Essentially, that's a basin where fees have been charged to groundwater pumpers for the last couple decades, I believe. And so they've developed a program where landowners, are building recharge projects on their properties, and there's a third-party certifier to monitor the benefits of those recharge programs, and they get a credit to the bill that they would pay for their pumping. So there are models out there that could be considered under this type of fee program down the road.
Marcus, could I jump in and ask you, do we yet know how well a surface recharge benefits the deep water, which is where the storage problem exists? Or is it mostly a shallow and maybe some surface water augmentation that where recharge on the surface helps? Or will we know more when we get better data?
Yeah, good points, Jerry. In order for the GSA to provide credits for recharge, there'd have to be a determination as to what the benefit is to the GSA and to implementing the Groundwater Sustainability Plan, and information on how much recharge is occurring at the parcel scale throughout the basin is very limited with our current information. And so there would need to be area specific or site specific studies done to really build out a recharge crediting program like that.
Okay, well, I don't see any questions that have not been answered either in the queue. I suppose we could go over some of the questions that have been answered in the queue, if that seems like would be good use of time. Oh, here's one just popped up. How has cloud seeding ever been considered to help with groundwater?
I don't think that's been considered in our area. It is something that's been raised and discussed in previous public meetings. I know there are other areas and basins in the state, that in areas in the country that have utilized the cloud seeding or attempted it, but that is not something that has been studied in this region to my knowledge, and it's not something that's included in the implementation of the Groundwater Sustainability Plan at this point.
Okay, and actually a couple more questions have popped up. Was the Santa Rosa Plain event recorded, the meeting recorded? And that sounds like a question for Anne.
Yes, the meeting was recorded, and if you want to get a recording, if you could reach out to me directly. It's not posted on the website because of some accessibility issues, but I will put my email in the Q&A, and you can reach out to me directly. Thank you.
Thanks, Anne. And here's a question for Marcus. Any ideas for surface storage in the basin? Is that something that's been considered, and how many creeks serve Sonoma Creek, et cetera?
So the plan primarily looks at, in terms of surface water, the opportunities for recharging that surface water. However, to the extent that there is surface water availability that can be put to beneficial use, obviously that would need to be, the water rights associated with that would need to be worked out. But I know in some areas, such as the Carneros area, in addition to the use of recycled water, capture of surface water and storage in ponds is one of the methods that's used for irrigation out there, and so that can help reduce the need for groundwater pumping. And so it is something that is done and could also be looked at to help offset groundwater use.
Okay, thanks, Marcus. And I'm not sure about this question. I'm going to turn it to Jerry, I think, and maybe he can figure it out. If I understood the voting percent, how was 63% weight for ag vote determined?
I knew as soon as I said that it would raise more questions than it answered. Benefit assessments are a quirky voting method as set up in the state constitution. For benefit assessments, your vote counts as much as what your assessment would be. So individual votes, for instance, that 50-acre vineyard would be able to have a lot more voting power than the 100-acre pasture. So in aggregate, 63% of all the groundwater in the basin is ag. So I just threw that out as an example globally, but it's actually on a vote by vote basis. So it's the ag users who are using the most water would have more voting power is the general statement I should have said.
Okay, thanks for that clarification, and that explains why I didn't really get the question. Is there a consideration for the benefit municipalities receive by not having to use their emergency wells, thanks to well owners paying for the warm spring project without benefit of water themselves?
So I would say that is something that could be considered in terms of the municipalities that are in Sonoma Valley. Valley Mineral Water District and the city of Sonoma have access to both groundwater through their well fields as well as imported Russian River water. And so during years where there is less Russian River water available, they generally are utilizing their well fields. Those well fields are also available for emergencies, and so having something that accounts for those uses is something that could be considered as part of the fee study, and would need to be discussed with all those different users.
Okay, and looks like Jerry's taking care of this, but and I don't know whether you want to answer it verbally, Jerry, as well, regarding the residential numbers.
Sure, there was a question that mentioned that the Groundwater Sustainability Plan allocated a lot more groundwater pumpage to residential than the 13% I showed in my data. I don't have an answer for that right now. I'll have to look in and see where the discrepancy comes from. If it's a matter of different categories in my categorization from the other plan, that may very well be it, but I'll have to look into it and I'll get back to the questioner on that. And
I'll just add a little bit of context to that, and I don't know exactly where the differences are, but part of the difference is likely that for the parcel-based estimates that Jerry presented, we're including additional, some additional classes such as the commercial uses within the in the basin, and so there's, I think, the overall, as Jerry mentioned, the overall amount of estimated pumping is higher than in comparison with the groundwater sustainability plan. I think the overall magnitude of rural residential pumping is likely about the same, but because the total amount of estimated pumping, the percentage is lower. But as Jerry mentioned, we probably do need to dive into that a little bit more to give you a more concrete answer.
And we can get back to Fred directly on that.
Okay, sounds great. And I do not see any more questions in the queue, so I think maybe I'll take the lead and thank everybody for all their good questions. We will record these in a meeting summary and use them in continuing effort to complete the rate and fee study. I think it's very helpful information for Jerry as well as for Marcus and the GSA. And this information will be posted on the website along. I know there was quite a few questions on the presentation. That'll be posted as well. So with that, I will turn it over to Chair Susan Gorn, who will make any closing remarks she has.
Well, I think you said exactly what I was going to say, Tim. I just want to once again thank everybody for participating in the virtual forum tonight. I wish at some point we would have an opportunity to gather in person, but we know that often this format makes it easy for you to participate and get the information that you need. So stay tuned as we go forward. And again, thank you to my fellow board members and the incredible advisory committee, all working together to work through this puzzle. So thanks, everybody.